Good morning. Happy Monday. We are back for another Mondays Live with Elle and Janus. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are talking about something that is near and dear to our heart. And before we get started and reveal that topic to you, I would like to introduce myself. So, I am Elle Cole from the blog cleverlychanging.com. My blog is about finance, health, and wellness, and also homeschooling. If you would love to learn more about homeschooling, I invite you to tune in to my homeschool podcast, the Cleverly Changing Podcast. You can find it by going to my website, cleverlychanging.com. There is a tab that says podcast. Just click there and you will be able to see episodes of my homeschool podcast. Can you tell everybody who you are?
Yes, I am her co-conspirator. I'm Janus Adams of janusadams.com. I should put that in the lower third. And I'm an author and historian. I'm also a former NPR correspondent. I host my own show, The Janus Adams Show, which is now also a podcast. I can't believe that after all these years of broadcasting, I'm finally a podcast. So, and the theme of my work has for years been, it's history-based, journalism-based, but it's history and healing. And it's a topic that is important to us all, but I think in the midst of all the chaos that we're constantly going through, bombarded with every day, it becomes a topic that's even more important to us. So welcome to Mondays Live with Elle and Janus. I'm delighted to be here and delighted that you're here joining us.
Awesome, awesome. So you sent me an article that has really just kind of caused me to think, and I know that's something that we wanted to talk about today. And the article is from the New York Times,
Yes.
and it is about Black women. And I think that when we talk about Black women, of course, if people are viewing us, they see that both you and I are Black women. And our conversations are intergenerational. You know, we're from two different generations, but we often find many similarities in the plight that we have faced in our careers or just in different journeys as Black women. There is a lot that we have in common as Black mothers, as mother of twins. And when I read the article that you shared, it it bothered me because it was something that I felt. When we talk about um, the article was about the souls of Black women, and it really talked about
Excuse me,
educate. Oh,
I'll just say it. The title of the article is "A Battle for the Souls of Black Girls." That was the title of the article in the Times.
yes,
And
and oh, I was just gonna say it was about the different experiences that Black women have in schools, young girls, the different experiences, and how often in the school system, they're not necessarily, while they may be doing the same thing that other students are doing, the treatment for them and the consequences are often more harsh than other students. And they're sent to in school suspension, are just being suspended, period. Things go on their records. And it really has a negative outcome for their future, which is interesting because what we also know is that Black women are the most educated demographic in the world. So it's like they're not having a great experience in school, but they're still in school. Can you speak on that at
well,
all?
yeah, I want to go back just a little bit to what attracted me to the article. It was this beautiful, beautiful photo of just the ecstasy on this Black woman's face as she embraced what we find to be her daughter. That just drew me into it. And then I found that what the article was about was her need to do that, her desire, of course, to do that, but her need to do that because of the oppressive conditioning that her daughter is being exposed to in school. And that was the background of the article. And then it goes into how this is happening across the board. We know that it happens a lot with Black boys. The Obama administration raised that and addressed that. Attorney General Eric Holder addressed it in the legal system. We're still not fully successful with it, but he did address it. Trump came in and tried to undermine it, but he did address it. When you speak of our being intergenerational, especially on a topic like this, it makes me furious. And it does so because we are different generations. We're probably about 25 years apart in age. And to think that I went through it, and when I was going through it, I was told by Dr. King, who I met because of my school desegregation experience, that because of what I was doing, he said that he knew it was hard, he knew it was painful, but because of what I was doing, no future children would have to go through what we were going through. And I often say, no, Dr. King didn't lie to me, America lied to me. And to think that from that period to this, our children are still systemically and systematically being beaten down by, like the police, those who are meant to protect them, those who are meant to educate them, those who are meant to help them on their way, and those who we pay with either our tax dollars or our tuition monies to do right by them. And those people are not doing that. And yes, people will say, well, you know, it's not all. I love Chris Rock's video that it's part of his routine, and it's become a meme almost about, you know, this few bad apples. He says, you know, you can't have a few bad apples on you know, the airline says, yeah, we have a few bad apples among the pilots, you know, one or two who like to fly into mountains, but basically it's just a few bad apples, you know, or anything else critical like that, you know, in surgery. Yeah, we have a few bad apples, you know, surgeons who like to leave the instruments inside of people, you know, but it's just a few bad apples. We have more than a few bad apples. We have people who are systemically being allowed, known to be disruptive to the psyches of these children, and still being able to keep their jobs as they do so. That's why I'm furious.
Absolutely. And I think it's okay to be furious. Sometimes there's that narrative that says Black women are angry. And when I read the article, it touched me in that I said, if this is what we are experiencing, we have every right to be angry. And so, you know, school is supposed to be a safe place for all children, not just some, not just people of a particular demographic. It's supposed to be a safe place for us all. And what we are learning is that it's not. And there have been videos about the school to prison pipeline when it comes to Black boys, but few have dared to talk about the treatment of Black girls. And that's really what really just struck me about the article and what they were bringing to light. And I know that depending, even if you are a Black female in one of the top schools, you're going to face some really tough times where you're having to prove yourself. And as a Black female who went to, I've been in different types of schools. I've been in schools that were some of the best. I've been in schools that were not, were some of the worst as far as the economic demographics. So I really experienced different things across the board. And I know that for me as a Black woman and where I'm at now, it's like I'm personally tired of always having to prove myself, prove that I am worthy, even when, let's say, my test scores have already shown to be of, you know, that they're good. But even though on paper, I may have, the intellect and the scores, I still have to always go into a room and prove myself in other ways. And as a Black woman, that I've gotten tired of that. And it's exhausting. It is emotionally exhausting because you sometimes feel like being yourself is not good enough. And that's not fair. And for young people, it's hard to reconcile that when you're a child because you don't have the capacity to reason what is going on and detach that from who you are. You do take it personally. So in the article, you reference the mom and the picture, and that kid, even though the mom is intentionally affirming her daughter is scarred. She's scarred for life because she will always have to go back to the time when she was mistreated because now that mistreatment is a part of who she is.
You raise a couple of really important points that are resonating in me. The question is always then, what do we do about it? One of the things that happened to me when my daughters were going through it, I was part of a Black women's book group. And one day we were all sitting, having a conversation. And one mother just spoke to the trouble that she was having with her experiencing with her son in school. And I must say, we were living in a very much top demographic um, town and school district in Connecticut. So that wasn't the issue, and that was the issue. That wasn't the issue in terms of, you say the resources that some schools do not have because of economics. It was the issue because I later found that some teachers resented the fact that they couldn't live in the town that I lived in. And therefore they felt it their responsibility to kind of, quote, put these Black girls, I don't even like to say in their place, because that's not their place. Their place is where I put them. They want to put our children where they can comfort themselves in feeling that they will feel better, their identity, their ego. And their ego is so fragile because it's based on racism. And that's their problem. That's their job. But our job is not to take it in. So when this woman in the book group started speaking about her son, the room kind of got quiet because it was a conversation that as Black women at that point we just hadn't had. And then it was revealed little by little that another of the mothers had had the same experience, and another of the mothers had had the same experience with their sons. And because it was a top demographic, they had the wherewithal to take those sons quietly out of the public schools and put them in one of the top male prep schools. And the prep schools, not that they don't have the same racist root, but the prep schools are different because prep schools cannot thrive if they're failing people. Their reputation is based on the success of their students, not the failure of their students. So any teacher who is not conforming to that is going to be out of there because it's ruining the reputation of the school. But that was one of the things that we found that we were doing very quietly. After that conversation, we realized that the thing we had to do was to band together and speak about it out loud, because we were paying for this. It was wrong. And there, we could afford to put our children in other schools, but every parent could not. And I had another incident. Ultimately, I did send my girls to prep school for junior high, for high school. This was a junior high school incident. But I did have then, with that experience, I did really deal with the principal severely because of the other Black children who were there whose parents couldn't deal with it. So that's one thing that comes to my mind. The second thing is that we internalize this, just the way we're saying, you know, we have to prove ourselves. And you're right, we're putting into that, but we're not proving ourselves. We, as you say, we proved ourselves when we passed that test. We proved ourselves when we showed up for class. We proved ourselves when we did our homework. That's proving yourself. What this is our having to pretzel ourselves because of someone else's insecurity and inadequacy. That has to be addressed, and it has to be addressed en masse by the parents who are involved. The third thing that comes to mind is that you have done, as a mother and your husband, as a father, parents, an amazing thing, not for this reason, but for the physical health of your children, and ended up protecting their mental health as well with homeschooling. And more parents are doing homeschooling now because of COVID, but they're also finding that the homeschooling that they're doing is reinforcing their children in ways that even our top demographic public schools are not supporting our children. And that is another thing that we talk about. So you have your homeschooling experience. I'm not in that age, in that demographic anymore. I have a granddaughter who's 11, but it's one of the reasons that I decided to really speak to my children's series in a way that I don't hadn't spoken about it before. It was always an anti-racist curriculum because its founding principle was on an incident rooted in that, which we can talk about at another time. But my Backpacks Kids Children series is seriously an anti-racist curriculum because anti-racism, and that's what I think we need to talk about now, is a way of life. It's not this book that you put into your child's hand. It's not this exceptional person that you talk about in Black History Month. It is a day-to-day, just as systemic, just as systematic as the racism. It is the day-to-day fuel that we give all children who dare great things. So, you know, but maybe you can talk a little bit about how you address that, you know, in preparing your daughters. As we know, it came about from a physical need, physiological, but what that has meant to your daughters in for their mental health and their righteous young minds.
Well, I think homeschooling for us was for many Black families that homeschool, they're homeschooling because of racism. So that is not uncommon in the homeschool area as Black people, because that is why a lot of people of color are leaving the public school system. So that's very common. our situation was unique because that wasn't really our reason for doing it, but it does come into play because for me as a Black mother, I had spent I guess from kindergarten through sixth grade in the public school system. After sixth grade, I went on to private school. So for me, I had had so many different experiences, but even though my experiences had been mixed, I loved school. And so not putting my own children in the school system was hurtful for me at first because I believed in the school system so much. And really, as a person who grew up in that environment, I had just told myself that this is a part of the adversity that we as Black people learn to overcome. So I actually wore those negative experiences as a badge of honor. And
Mm,
a part of me felt like my kids needed to go through them to toughen them up because that's really how we've been conditioned.
mm,
And so for me to homeschool my kids, it was just completely different. Of course, my husband had been homeschooled, and then after homeschool, he went to an all Black private school where he didn't face any of the same experiences that I
mm,
faced. So we just had two completely different experiences. And so teaching our kids, what we were teaching them was really, the academics, but more than anything, it was love and it was nurture. So our homeschool is really centered around nurturing our students. But even though you may have your child in a homeschool environment, the world still exists. You're not going to do everything from inside your home. And so your children are still going to face all different types of racism and negative experiences that come from outside your home because even though you may homeschool, it is very hard to keep yourself and your children in a bubble. I know that we are living in a time of quarantine and pandemics, but it is completely different than what homeschooling traditionally is. We aren't
mm,
usually at home, and we are not usually in a bubble. And in those homeschool environments, it can really be a mixed bag. So for families who are thinking, I like what, I want to just kind of back up just a little bit because I like what you said about what are we going to do? And as a parent who homeschools, I really feel like it's only part of it because, like I said, we still face different things even as a homeschool family. You can't if you're a family here in America, you're not going to be able to avoid these type of experiences. This is a part of the America that we live in. And so one thing that you mentioned was speak up. And I've had to learn how to advocate for myself and for my kids. My kids haven't faced things as outwardly. Sometimes it'll be another kid with sly comments. It hasn't necessarily been totally direct. But for me as a parent in different groups and communities, I have faced it. And I've had to first, just like you mentioned, I had to learn how to speak up. The next thing you talked about moving your child to a different environment. As a homeschool family, whatever I'm doing with my children, I'm paying for it. So if it's not a good fit, I leave and I move to a different area that is a better fit, somewhere
mhm.
where my children will feel comfortable and I will feel comfortable as a parent. And so that is something that we still have at our disposal. We can still do that. The next thing that you mentioned was your backpack kids series, and I think it is so important, even if you are not a person of color, to expose your children to different philosophies and different types of people, diverse communities, diverse environment, diverse literature. And so it is important to, if you want this generation and the future to be better, you start while a child is young. And so an anti-racism curriculum is not just for Black children. If
No,
anything, it is for all different types of children.
it's for
That's the
everybody.
only way we are going to see a difference.
Thank you so much for mentioning that. The short version of the story of how backpacks got started is that my children came home from nursery school and saw a boy that was an extended part of our family and that they loved deeply. And all of a sudden, they shrieked and fled from him. Bottom line is that we found out that it was a so-called authentic Native American curriculum that had been installed in their nursery school. And it was full of the worst stereotypes possible. So here we are talking about, you don't have to, it's not about being Black to have the anti-racist curriculum. My children were getting a top-notch white education, to be blunt about it, that was teaching them to be racist towards Native Americans. That was what had terrified them. And so when I found that that was now part of our experience at only 3, I did not get to start it then, but I was very mindful of the idea of, not for my children, but for me, it was really positively formative, because it led to 2 things. Number one, that was one of those moments when I realized racism has nothing to do with us personally. You know, we're always made to feel as though racism is because, well, if you could just do something more about yourself, I wouldn't have to be racist towards you. You know, that's nonsense. And it's not about us personally. It is a tactic used to undermine you, so you'll take yourself out of the game. You'll take yourself out of being what someone else wants to decide is a threat. And why do they feel it's a threat? Because historically, the United States has been so racist towards other people. It's afraid that one day those people will strike back. And we have been so engaged, and this too is part of the anti-racist curriculum. When you are engaged in just trying to move forward and bring something else positive and make the world better, you do not have time to waste your time saying, you know, that son of a gun who did that to me, that's where I'm going to put my energy. Oh, please think of the things you can't do when you do that, you know. So that too, that understanding of anti-racism is also about undergirding oneself. I just, for those who may be listening to us, I just want to give some insight into my experience as a child, that alerted me immediately when things happened with my daughters. And you know, knowing that you've got to do something for your twin daughters as well. But in my case, with this school being part a New York City and therefore a northern school desegregation pioneer at 8 years old, at a certain point, it was time for me to go into the counselor's office. And the guidance counselor was into, and what do you want to be? And I said, well, I'm going to be a concert pianist. And the woman did not know what to do with it. I can still see her face all these years later because it was so traumatic. She did not know what to do with that. And she said, well, where did you get that idea? Indeed, I had started playing the piano at 3 and had been studying, you know, as a 3-year-old, but I had advanced enough. I don't usually use the word on myself, but advanced enough that other people began to say this may be a prodigy on the piano. And so that was where I got the idea. My aunt was a fine concert pianist, a composer, brilliant at it. So I got the idea that I could be. The woman didn't know what to do. She got feverish almost, and she said, so you like to work with your hands. I tell you what, we'll make you a seamstress. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a seamstress. And indeed, I liked to sew and still do, but I did not admit that to her. There is nothing wrong with that. And there's also nothing overly right with being a concert pianist. This world functions when we all bring our skills and our talents to whatever it is. I can't walk on the stage as a concert pianist if somebody else didn't love being a seamstress. So I'm not playing that game. But that's what she did to undermine and destroy, at that point, a 10-year-old. Those are the kinds of things that we are experiencing on a regular basis with our children going to school. This girl in the article whose mother had to embrace her, protect her, you can see the look on her mother's face. I remember when I started my column in Wilton, Connecticut, and it was at a time when in Connecticut there was a young woman named Tisha Byers who was her parents spoke out because she was an honor school student, an honor student who was about to be named to the National Honor Society. I've forgotten, it has Greek letters, but in her high school. And they called the police on her one day to remove her from school because they said they didn't like her dress, the way she was dressed, so that they could undermine this child. And it became a story that was actually covered in the New York Times and other places because the parents did speak up. Obviously, this woman that we are reading this article about, thank goodness that woman spoke up so that the rest of us can not only embrace our children, but embrace the children we don't even know. When you see a Black kid walking down the street, give him a smile. That's all you have to do. It's just another human being. You know, if that's all you can do, do that. Do it to anybody. If you get in the habit of doing it to everybody, you don't have to worry whether it's an Asian child or a Black child or an indigenous child. You just carry a positive attitude. But thank goodness those parents did. At that same period of time, other people had to fight back for me because I got a couple of very racist letters to the editor trying to stop me from being a columnist. One of which said that I was the kind of negative impact that was encouraging a child like Tisha Byers. I'd never even met Tisha Byers. At that point, I hadn't even reported on Tisha Byers, and I was being accused of it. And when I realized who Tisha Byers was, I reached out to her, but also 2 white people, residents of our town, reached out to the newspaper and said, oh no, someone saying disaffected Blacks go back to Africa is not acceptable in our town. So you never know where the outreach will lead, but right-thinking people must do the right thing. Maya Angelou said, this is the time for thinking people to think. My grandfather said, let no one contaminate your mind. So that's where I am.
Way to end today's show. I think what you just said is just the perfect way to bring this to a close because, like Maya Angelou said, thinking people think. And that's what we have to do. We have to think and advocate for others.
And let no one contaminate your mind. Thanks, Elle. I'm so glad we had a chance to be together.
Until next week.
And thank you for joining us today on Mondays Live with Elle and Janus. And if you don't catch us live, I hope you'll catch us in the repeat of these broadcasts, and also write in and give us a little hint of something else that you'd like us to talk about. And also just bring a smile to someone else's lips today.
Yes. And if you are watching the replay, feel free to leave the word replay in the comment section. You can also leave comments on the rebroadcast because we
Yeah,
will monitor those as well.
yeah,
And we just thank you for joining us. Please be sure to share these broadcasts with your friends, especially if there has been a part of the conversation that really resonated with you. So we
yes.
encourage you to share and tune in next week at the same time.
I'm
All
Janice
right. Bye now.
Adams. Elle Cole. Bye now.
And I'm Elle Cole.